this year, because we're here in Joel's hangar, we'd kind of give just a brief overview of what type of coverage an FBO or a maintenance shop would have. So a commercial general liability policy, and there's many different coverages. Okay, there's many different coverages on the commercial general liability policy, but we're really just going to touch on the main three here, and then also go over some claim scenarios and talk about how these coverages apply to the aircraft owner. So I've got about 5 real-life claim scenarios that I've had, and we'll talk about, again, how it applies to you, whose policy should cover what, and things like that. On the side. Here it is. Okay. There we go. Oh. All right. So here's the 3 main coverages of a commercial general liability policy. So the premises liability is kind of an all-encompassing coverage for bodily injury or property damage that the FBO causes to other people. But there's also a lot of exclusions in that coverage too. So that coverage is not going to apply to aircraft that the FBO owns or any aircraft that are in the care, custody, or control of the FBO as well. So you'll hear me mention those, what we call the 3 C's, quite a bit throughout here: care, custody, and control. So that's going to come up quite a bit. And depending on if the aircraft is in the care, custody, and control of the FBO, that can dictate which coverage or which policy might cover a particular claim. So, we basically just refer to the premises liability as a slip and fall coverage for customers that are in the FBO or repair shop. If there's an oil spot on the ground that wasn't cleaned up and they slip and fall or trip over a cord or whatever it is. But again, that can also apply to other aircraft that are not in the care, custody, control of the insured, and can apply to property damage to other people's hangars or buildings and things like that. The next is the products completed operations. So that's what covers an aircraft that an FBO or a maintenance shop has already completed work on or an operation on. This aircraft is no longer in the care, custody, or control of the FBO, so they've done the work, the airplane goes away or flies away. You have an engine failure because the mechanic didn't put the oil filter on properly, or maybe there's an engine failure due to the lineman at the FBO put Jet A instead of avgas in, or contaminated fuel of some sort. Those are a couple of examples of products completed operations types of claims. And then the last one is the hangar keepers coverage. Hangar keepers is coverage for damage to aircraft that are in the care, custody, or control of the FBO or repair shop. So that's while the work is still being done. So you can kind of differentiate those products and hangar keepers. Products is after the work is done. Hangar keepers, the airplane is still in the hangar, the work is still being done on it, okay? And obviously the most common example of hangar keepers claims are hangar rush. All right, so here's, this is one of my customers' TBMs. This happened just about a month ago. And he left his TBM in the care, custody, or control. Oh, yeah, sorry about that. In the care, custody, or control of the FBO, left the airport, and got a call very soon after to come back because the FBO backed a motor tug into his prop and caused this damage here. So who covers this and which coverage is this? So this is pretty cut and dry negligence on the part of the FBO, and this is a hangar keepers claim. So pretty easy one. Shouldn't be anything crazy going on with this one, but this is a hangar keepers claim that would be with the FBO. And of course, he called me and notified me. And the first thing that I would say to any of you out there as well, if this happened, is, no, go talk to the FBO, talk with them and see if they're going to take care of it first before we file a claim on your policy. even though this wasn't any fault of the aircraft owner, obviously, if the FBO is going to take care of it, it's obviously better not to have any claim on the aircraft owner's policy, because then we don't have to report that and have to explain it later on in the future. So, and it looks like that's what's going to happen with this one. All right, so
is that a new problem, or is that a engine teardown inspection?
well, it's I believe it's still going on. Again, it just happened, so I think that Dollar with TBM is involved as well as Pratt. I think that because it was not a sudden stoppage, I don't think they're going to have to do a teardown. Again, it was just sitting on the rampway and it got backed into. So I don't think there's going to be a teardown. It should be a relatively small claim. I think they're still trying to determine if it's going to be a repair replace. I would assume it's going to be replaced, but. Yep, that's a good point. So anytime that it's a liability claim, so I guess I'll start by saying this. As an aircraft owner, if he filed this claim on his policy, there is no loss of use coverage. Now, there is some extra expense for renting a substitute aircraft that can help out a little bit. It's usually only a couple $1,000s a day, and there's a maximum limit. But there is no technically loss of use coverage on a standard aircraft policy. But because it's a liability claim, because we're going after the FBO for it, all of that is included. So as an aircraft owner, you are able to recoup all of your damages, depreciation of value because you got damage history, loss of use. You can pretty much have the FBO's liability policy cover all of that. All right, now next one here, had a customer who had an RON at an airport. Kind of the same type of deal as the TBM guy here. He left his aircraft on the ramp. He didn't see any dent when he left, and he came back the next day and found a dent in his leading edge. And the airport, the FBO, says they don't know anything about it. Nobody reported anything. Not their problem. So what happens in this case? Who covers this, or who should cover this? Well, so I would say, one, I told him the same thing. It would be better if the FBO covered this. I mean, if there's no security camera footage and you can't prove they did anything, it'd be pretty tough, to tell. But there's no other aircraft that were damaged. There's no other tugs or anything out there that had any damage on it. What we think happened was maybe the lineman dropped the fuel nozzle and it swung and hit the leading edge, but they wouldn't fess up to it, and they said, not our problem. So as an aircraft owner, you're left with two options. You can either hire an attorney and sue them and go after them and go through this long legal process and all this out-of-pocket expenses, or, and of course, this is a relatively small claim as well, so, or you can just file a claim on your aircraft policy, and that's what this guy ended up doing. So your aircraft policy does cover this, and luckily it was a very small amount, and we can try to explain that in the future to the carriers as we're marketing his account or shopping it, that this is what we think happened. But unfortunately, any claim, you have to tell carriers about it, and there are going to be some carriers for a couple of years who are just going to say, no, we'd rather not touch this account until you get a little more time behind that claim.
You recommend taking pictures of the plane every time you leave it on a rack at a faraway place? Not a bad idea.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea. Probably that could become a little bit cumbersome, but yeah, I mean it's kind of like a rental car. I always take pictures of the rental car when I get one, so they don't come back later and say you caused this dent or the scratch or whatever. So if it's not a very frequent thing and you have time for that, it's not a bad idea. Yeah, Dave.
Told me a long time ago, you park your airplane overnight, FBO
Yeah. Right, right. Yeah, I guess, again, the only question with that is just because there's a dent on your airplane when you come back, how do you prove it was the FBO that did that? Could have been some other random aircraft owner that was walking by and, dropped his bag or fell or, something and was too embarrassed to admit anything, so. Yeah. Yeah. Yep, absolutely. And, if it's an FBO that you use quite frequently and you're a good customer of theirs, hopefully they want to try to step up and get you taken care of. But, if it's your first time in there, they don't even know who you are. I don't know if they would do the right thing or not.
It's just like in the car business. Can some FBOs ask you to sign an implicit waiver of liability?
Well, I guess they try. I've never seen an FBO necessarily do that, but we do have, there's passenger liability waivers that you as an aircraft owner could make a passenger sign. There's several different waivers that you could incorporate, in your operations.
Parking at your own risk. So you're parking here at your own risk.
Really small.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's a tough one because, I'd say, oh, no, absolutely don't sign that. But then if there's not another FBO on the field, what are you going to do? Pack up and leave and go to the next airport and drive longer or whatever, Mm-hmm.
So I asked him just trying to make
Yeah, right. Well, again, that's assuming that the prop is going to be replaced, which, again, because that's so new.
Well, that's the point that the owners really want to know.
Yep.
Is, hey, if you want to protect yourself, then remove and replace it. I had a guy that smashed the bus up with me. Oh God, the airplane's going to have an inch. It's the rest of its life. He's already got his calculator out. He's figuring out how much he's going to sue for.
Right.
Bring the airplane over here, we'll take it off, throw it in the trash, and put another new wing on.
Right, and as the aircraft owner too, again, because that's the liability of the FBO's policy, you have the right to, the adjuster is going to try to do what's right for the FBO. So, but you as the person who received the damage, you have the right to go back to the FBO or the adjuster for the FBO and say, no, that's not what I want to do. This is what is going to happen, and that's what I've told, my guy. He's being very, very nice and wanted to take into consideration the FBO and everybody else, and said, no, this is you. Do what's right for you. Tell them exactly what you want, and don't take anything less. Yeah.
Well, Lance, also, you can sign all the waivers you want. There's still help to support negligence kind of thing.
Right.
It doesn't give a free pass no matter what happens at the airport.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. All right, so next one here, had a local maintenance shop down in Tennessee, actually just down the road from us, and was packing up at night, left his truck outside his hangar overnight, and it spontaneously combusted, caught on fire, caught the hangar on fire, and burned up 3 airplanes inside of his hangar. Now, this is just a random picture of a burned up airplane. This is not, it's just for, visual purposes. This is not the real one. But again, who covers that? Is that the aircraft owner's policy? Is that the maintenance policy? So it's not the mechanic's fault that his truck caught on fire, right? Could be the truck policy. That could have been a possibility as well. So, I think what this one came back to was the mechanic did leave his truck there, and it was his truck, so there's some vicarious liability that flows back to him because of that. It's his responsibility. So this one actually got covered under hangar keepers. So the mechanics hangar keepers policy covered all of those airplanes. Yeah, maybe. I don't think that the 3 airplanes inside were that high of value, though. It may not have been worth it to the carrier to go after that small amount of money. And, you know, they're not a carrier, they're not going to subrogate back against their insured either. You know, even though that is a different carrier on his auto, it's still the same person. So I don't think that they would do that just based on they're paying out a claim on behalf of their customer. They're then not going to go back and sue their own customer, you know, because that's what would have to happen to recover that on his other policies as well. All right, this is one that you're probably all familiar with. This is the John Toon tornado damage. So, and actually I think these 2 airplanes in front, I'm not positive about the one in the back, but the 2 airplanes in front I know were mine that were totaled in this tornado. And I know we were talking a little bit about it last night, but there ended up being $100 million worth of damage at this airport. And this one is important because I hear this come up all the time. And so let's say your aircraft is in your mechanic's hangar. You've left it in his care, custody, or control, and a tornado comes through, wipes out the hangar, and totals all the airplanes. So whose policy covers that? Think so? No, it is not. There's no federal coverage for tornadoes. That is an act of God, though. An act of God is not the negligence or the fault of the mechanic. So whenever you have liability, there has to be some negligence on behalf of that person. So this is one that all of the individual aircraft owners, their policies are going to cover this and did, and pay for these total losses. So the reason why I say that's important is because I cannot tell you how many times throughout the year that I have people call me and say, my aircraft is going to be down for maintenance the entire year. It's going to be in my customer's hangar. He's got hangar keepers coverage. I want to cancel my policy. I said, you know, oh, his hangar keepers policy it's going to cover it all. I say, no, it's not. You know, it's going to cover a very small amount of things like hangar rash if the mechanic causes it. But acts of God, you know, you've got tornadoes. If you're in Florida, you got hurricanes. The roof could collapse because of snow. I mean, there's all kinds of, yeah, no matter what region of the country you're in, there's all kinds of things that can happen to your aircraft on the ground that are not going to be any fault of your mechanic. So I would always recommend keeping your policy in place and not canceling it, but you can move it to a ground not in motion coverage. It's going to save you, you know, maybe 50 or 40 to 50% of your whole premium by doing that. Now, if the, you know, let's say the mechanic left the hangar door unlocked and it blew the door in and it threw debris through the hangar door and damaged the aircraft, you know, maybe you could try to prove some negligence on the part of the mechanic at that point. But again, you know, unless there's some security camera footage showing that the mechanic actually did lock the door, that'd probably be pretty tough to prove as well. All right, so again here, not the same picture of the claim. It was a much smaller airplane, but you'd be surprised if you Google fuel trucks hitting an airplane. There's not many options out there. So yeah. So we had a local FBO manager years ago who was driving a fuel truck, and he clipped the tail of an airplane and wrapped the tail back around towards the nose, bent the tail forward. And so, you know, we can skip a step on this one. That's obviously negligence of the FBO, the manager who was driving. But which coverage that we talked about would cover this? So it is the general liability, but the point here that I want to make is that, you know, you can tell it's not always black and white. this was not a hangar keeper's claim. Now, the adjuster of the FBO did try to cover it under hangar keepers, but we went back to him and we refuted that. And we said, wait a second, this aircraft was just sitting out on the ramp. It was a random airplane. It was not in the care, custody, or control of our FBO. This should not be a hangar keeper's claim. It should be a premises liability claim. And the reason why that's important is because hangar keepers, I think, without looking at the policy, I'm pretty sure hangar keepers is the only coverage on a general liability policy that carries a deductible. So basically, we saved our customer a $5,000 deductible by getting it covered under the premises liability instead of the hangar keepers. All right, so this was an interesting one that I found out more about it the further along we went in the process. When I was first notified of this by my customer, he just told me that his aircraft was sitting out on the ramp and high winds flipped it over and he wanted to file a claim. Okay, no problem. We can take care of that. Well, it turns out that the winds flipped his aircraft into another airplane, that flipped into another airplane, that flipped into another airplane. So there was 3 University of North Dakota flight school aircraft that were totaled. And so we know that his is covered, but in that particular instance, who do you think covers the other aircraft? Is it his policy still, or is it the University of North Dakota's policy? Very good. So I got the claim settlement back, and it included $500,000 worth of liability damage to the University of North Dakota. And I called the adjuster and I said, whoa, what are we doing here? Why are we paying for all these other airplanes? These were high winds. This is not his fault. And he said, yeah, normally I agree with you, but it turns out he didn't tie his airplane down. So he got distracted putting his windshield covers on and just forgot to tie the airplane down. So, and they found, they did have security footage of that as well, showing that he didn't tie the airplane down. So that ended up, that's a big difference between high winds flipped your airplane over and you had a $15,000 claim versus you forgot to tie it down and caused $500,000 worth of damage to somebody else, So that's a big difference for the future of his account as we're shopping it for renewal or trying to get other options for him in the future. All right, so that's, yeah.
So, taking that scenario, you're another FBO, you pick your airplane in FBO, they move your airplane, supposed to tie it down, not tie it down. Now this accident happens. Who's covered that?
Yeah, I would say that's, negligence on the part of the FBO. They were the ones who forgot to tie it down. Yeah, and you left it in their care. It was their responsibility to do that, not yours. Yeah. So that's all of our claim scenarios we have here. And again, the purpose of that is, hopefully it gets you thinking about a couple of different things that, it may not always be your own individual aircraft policies, but kind of how the people you're doing business with, how your policies can kind of, interrelate with each other. And also just serve as a reminder that, you can be the best pilot in the world, and you'll see that none of these were flight-related incidents. So all of these claims were just random occurrences that happened on the ground. So anything can happen in one of these airplanes out there at any time. Now, quick market update. It's been fairly stable this year. I think probably most of you who have already had your renewals would say that you probably still got a little bit of an increase, but it probably wasn't as much as you've had in the past. So I have rarely seen any increase over 10% this year, whereas a year or two ago, everybody was seeing at least 25, if not 30, and I even had 50, 60, depends on what it was. So, it's not much better yet, but it's not worse, not much worse either, and, it's kind of flying a little bit. if you would have told me, or if you would have asked me at the beginning of the year, what do you think is going to happen with the market? And who knows, maybe I told some of you this. I would have said that, yeah, we're seeing signs of the hard market, might be going away, and maybe the rates will start to be flat, and then, a couple more years go by, more carriers join the marketplace, we'll start seeing that downturn towards the soft market again. But, we are still seeing increases, and it's because a couple of different things have happened really since the beginning of the year. And one is that we continue to have more inflation. So the cost of parts, the cost of materials continue to equal higher repair costs. And I've heard from the carriers that just due to inflation alone, they may have to continue to raise rates for another couple of years just to make up for that cost of materials. So, they were kind of getting their rates up a little bit, and they thought, okay, that's good. This is kind of where we need it to be profitable. And then all of a sudden, inflation just kind of goes back up, and now they're, okay, well, we're going to have to come back up a little bit, to account for that as well. So now not every carrier has said that, but that's just kind of what I've heard from a couple of different carriers that I wanted to make you all aware of, is that they feel like due to inflation, their rates still are not where they need to be to account for all the repairs. And then the second thing that happened was this. A lot of people don't think about this because it's so far away from us, but there is actually an estimated $10 billion worth of aircraft that are stranded in Russia or seized by the Russian government right now. Upwards, the estimates are $25 billion to include other airport property and buildings. And those same carriers that would potentially cover those aircraft over there are the same carriers who are insuring you all's aircraft as well. So no doubt, if that happens, that's going to trickle down into the USGA markets. So you may remember, I don't know if it was last year or a couple of years ago, I showed some slides of the total aviation losses in a year, and how they've literally doubled in the past 5 or 6 years, from 600 million to 1.3 billion. So you're talking about 1.3 billion a year is what they pay, and we're talking about 10 to 25 billion in one event. So that could be the largest claim in aviation history, and that money's got to come from somewhere. So another point here. If it was your aircraft that was over in Russia, seized by the Russian government, is that a covered claim? That's right, if you have war coverage. So most of you, I would say, who at least are insured with me, probably have war coverage. Now, it is an optional coverage, so there could be some people who chose not to purchase it based on, if you thought it wasn't an exposure for you, which is certainly an understandable decision if that was the case. But the important part here is a couple of things. One, Warhol does not just provide coverage for damage to the aircraft due to war. These are all of the perils here that are covered by the Warhol endorsement. So, in the U.S., having a strike or a riot near the airport is, might not be such an uncommon thing anymore as it was, 10 years ago or however long. So you're talking about strikes, riots, civil commotion, acts of sabotage, but we see our highlighted ones here. It does cover confiscation, nationalization, seizure, etc., under order of any government. So all of those aircraft over there that have Warhol coverage would have coverage. Now, it's probably going to be a couple of years before we find out what's going to happen with that. But the banks are not just going to, all those banks that are financing those aircraft are not just going to let Russia keep all their airplanes and keep all the money. They're going to want that covered, and the insurance carriers are going to be having to cover that and pay the banks back. Now, one more quick point here. An immediate, response from what's going on with Russia and Ukraine is that the reinsurance carriers for all of these underwriting companies that you all are with are already pushing them to raise their Warhol rates due to the expectation that there's going to be some type of loss over there in Russia. So what we've seen is that Warhol rates have gone up already from 0.025% of your whole value up to either 0.050 or 0.075 on the high end. There's really only been one carrier who has gone up to 0.075%. But even on the high end, just a quick example there, you can see Warhol coverage, $250,000 Aerostar at the lower limit, $63 a premium for the year. Warhol coverage at the highest rate would be $188. So you're talking about, and again, it's based on the value. So if you have a higher value Aerostar, it's going to be a higher amount of premium. But in this particular example, you're talking about an increase of $120-ish, $125 or so. So not a huge amount, but it is something, and thought it was important to share with you all. And that, of course, would be in addition to, just any other standard market increases that you might see.
So is there not a responsibility on an owner if you know that, war is likely to break out to relocate it? So like with a sailboat or a yacht, you need to get it out of hurricane area certain parts of the year, time of the year. I mean, there's no responsibility on the pilot, because I'm sure there are plenty of people that move their airplanes out of Ukraine.
Yeah, probably. I think that there is, but I think that, there could be unforeseen circumstances, whether they were evacuating people and they wouldn't let them. I don't know exactly what happened over there, but there could be instances where they maybe weren't allowed to. If Russia just comes in and shuts the whole airport down without giving anybody a heads up, hey, you all got 5 days to move your airplane.
I guess what I'm saying is they'll go through and they'll just, will each case be on an individual basis, or will they go through and say, because this is war zone, everything gets covered?
Well, goes back to Alex saying, we've talked about several different claims examples over the years, and there is no student exclusion in the policy.
I'm out of luck.
Otherwise, none of these claims will be paid. All right. Any questions?
I'm just curious, you mentioned before about security cameras with FBOs and maintenance facilities. For the general operator, general aviation aircraft, that has his airplane hangar, like a T hangar. If you would put in a camera system, is there any value or decrease in insurance for doing that? To monitor what goes on when you're not there?
Not on the general liability side, and not on the aircraft owner side for the aircraft policy, but where security cameras come into play on rating is for hangars. So the hangar property carriers for insuring the actual building. That's a question that's pretty standard that they want to know is this: do you have a security system on your hangar or not? And for property that is insured inside the hangar, tools and things like that.
Inside that, so you have the tools and stuff that you generally have for your airplane. That would just be something additional, something further up. You did say, hey, status in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, not a bad idea, not a bad thought at all. But yeah, unfortunately, on the aircraft policies, that's not really an underwriting criteria that they really discuss or look into. Yeah, Charlie. Now, are you saying if you have a land lease, you own the hangar then? So your aircraft policy, remember, liability is property damage or bodily injury to others. So it's not going to cover anything that you own. Now, if you rented a hangar from somebody else, there could be some damage to premises rented, and on the general liability policy as well, there's some fire, legal, or damage to premises rented coverage on there. If your aircraft catches on fire, you start a fire and it burns up the hangar, there's a small amount of coverage that will cover on the liability side to the airport-owned hangar. But if you own the hangar, there's no coverage on your aircraft policy. You have to insure that hangar that you own yourself on a separate policy. So I have never seen an umbrella policy that would cover anything aviation related. Typically, they're all going to have an aviation exclusion in them, but I don't want to say that as a blanket item. You know, that would be something to certainly discuss with your agent who has the umbrella policy, so he can review the policy and determine that. But I'd say there's a very strong chance there's an aviation exclusion in your personal umbrella policy. And there are no umbrella policies in aviation. There are only excess liability policies that you can place just over the aircraft liability, but it's not an umbrella that is all encompassing and goes over your entire operation. There is, let me try to count them in my head real, I mean, at least 5. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I mean, it could be up to 7. Now, 2 of those carriers, their rates on Aerostars are extremely high to the point where it's like, don't even send me that quote. It's just ridiculous. So I'd say there's probably really, you know, a good handful of 5 competitive Aerostar carriers. But, you know, each carrier has their own appetite. So there's not going to be a carrier who just says, oh, yeah, we'll take whatever Aerostar you can send us. You know, there's going to be certain value limitations. Maybe they don't want to offer a certain amount of liability coverage. There's going to be carriers who have different stipulations based on pilot age and pilot hours. So there's a lot more that goes into it, and I don't know about your specific situation. Happy to discuss it with you later, but you know, there could be more carriers than that, but it just depends on other factors. Yeah.
Lance, I was at a 10-year gathering home a few months ago, and subject to insuring older pilots came up.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the guys got up and talked about, well, I don't know, he was in his late 70s. He was walking in the ones, and he said, he's not a doctor. He refers to himself as a statistical outlier. Like, I'm not like the average 78-year-old guy.
Me either.
I've got record, I've got this, I've got that.
Mm-hmm.
He said that if you do that and you submit it along with your renewal, or your broker submits it along with the renewal, it'll get you senior underwriter. And it may make a difference in their opinion of your risk.
Mm-hmm. Well, a couple of things. I'd say one, it could absolutely make a difference. I mean, as an agent or a broker, I would like whatever, as much information as possible that you would think states your case that I could use to pass on to the underwriter at renewal time. You know, whether it gets to a senior guy in the company or not is really more so up to, I'd say, the broker or the agent, rather than, you know, anytime somebody writes something like that up, it doesn't automatically mean it's going to go to a senior underwriter. You know, that would be up to the agent to make sure that if he was a long, you know, agent who had a long history, had been doing this for a long time and had those relationships, then absolutely, you know, he could do that. But, you know, I don't think just any agent would have those relationships or know exactly who to go to on that. You know, and again, I don't know about that guy's specific situation, but, you know, there's certainly a lot of senior pilots out there who can maintain and keep their coverage, but I don't know for a fact that his write-up did him, you know, just a huge amount of favors or not. It could have just been that, you know, he's been with the same carrier for so long, and he did the right thing on the front end before he turned 70, that they're willing to support him now. And rather than
you know, it's saving any premium or anything like that, I would say something like that is really more so keep you flying, you know, keep you in the cockpit,
keep them comfortable with renewing your policy and avoiding certain stipulations. Like I've seen, you know, really two main things that I've seen happen. Once you start getting to that 75 or older mark, either the carrier wants you to be, well, I mean, sometimes it could be 80 depending on the airplane too, or the carrier. But either the carrier wants you to be dual only at all times with have another co-pilot with you and not fly solo anymore, or they want you to go get an annual first class medical. So they want you to do a little more intensive medical exams where they may not accept the third class anymore.
Any impact on flying with basic med insurance premium?
No, if a carrier accepts basic med, and most of them do, there's no impact on premium. They're not going to charge you anything more for doing that. But going back to the age thing, you might reach an age where eventually they say, okay, you can't do basic med anymore. We need you to go actually get a first class medical if you want to keep flying solo. What's that? Again, depends on the carrier, but I would say, you know, high 70s, 78. You know, some could be there.
There's some carriers out there who might even do that
at an earlier age, but those carriers, that's really more on the turbine stuff and corporate flown stuff. So that particular instance wouldn't apply to Aerostars specifically. I'd say with Aerostars, depending on the carrier, it could even be, you know, 79 or 80. As long as you're with a carrier who will support you on the front end, you know, you can't go, once you hit 78, you can't, the agent can't shop your renewal and all of a sudden get you all these other options. You know, you got to make sure you're in with a good carrier who's going to support you in the long run on the front end before you turn 70. Yeah, okay.
When you're specifying an ATP, we know first class medical, that's good for 6 months. Are they saying that every 6 months you have to do first class, or just do a first class once a year, to get the priority exam and all that sort of thing?
Right. Yeah, that's a great question because on the policy, I know that the FAA says that it's only 6 months, but on the policy it does say annual first class. Right. Yep. Now, you know, that's another good point too. If you, that could certainly help though. Again, talking about just gathering as much information as possible to help the agent. If you said, you know, insurance carriers like to see people going above and beyond, doing more than what they're required. So if they're requiring you to go to Aerostar school every year and get an annual first class, and you say, you know what, I'm going to go do it every 6 months instead, you know, that would certainly be something I'd share with them. And, you know, that goes a long way. I'm not saying that if you do it every 6 months, all of a sudden your rate's going to drop in half, but that's, again, something that will keep the carrier comfortable with, okay, this guy's doing all the right things and he's going above and beyond, and we're going to continue to support him as long as we possibly can. Yeah, wings. Yep. All right, anybody else?
When underwriters look at airplanes, for example,
You mean in their rating or? Yeah. You know, I think that that's probably better if they weren't insured, but
not necessarily going to say that if there's an underwriter who's very involved and paying attention, sees that may stick in his mind, and he may say, you know what, I don't think I want to do this. But I'd say more so, it's your first 2 points. They're going to look at their claims history with that particular airplane.
Okay.
And if they see, oh, we just paid out a big claim, or we've had a bad run with Aerostars recently, then that's going to kind of sour their taste a little bit on that. But also, there's a lot of carriers too. I'll say that it's not all just pointed at the Aerostar. There's a lot of carriers out there who just don't want old piston twins. Period.
They've seen that they're having a lot of losses with old piston twins. So,
and I don't have any specifics on, what they're looking at there, but that's something that we've been hearing quite a lot. 6 months ago, we've had carriers that would have quoted, 1973-10 or something. And now all of a sudden, 6 months later, we're going back and they're like, oh no, we're not doing any piston twins under a certain age anymore. So usually 35 to 40 years is kind of a max age for a lot of carriers on twins now as well.
they say too, a lot of people say, well,
because you've got 2 engines on a twin, there's redundancy and it's safer.
and that is true, but what they're finding is that it obviously takes a greater level of skill to fly on one engine.
And that a lot of people, if they have one engine go out, they don't always make it back to the airport,
and some of them still have accidents when they're on their one engine operation. So that's been a little bit of a part of it as well. So yeah, so piston twins in general
have taken a little bit of a hit recently as well, just aside from the Aerostar name.
Even though we're keeping record on the fact that by adding the second engine, they lost the first engine, that people bring it back, they keep it, that's not being able to happen.
Well, I'm not sure how they would find that out. I mean, that's not going to necessarily be in the news, and you're not going to report that to the carriers. So. Yeah. I wonder if
I wonder if there's any way for them to get that. I think unless there's some type of damage, there's several different aviation accident websites that I follow, and I know they follow too. I mean, I'm sure you all have heard about Captain's Report, websites like that, but I don't think they really just report any engine failure that results in a safe landing.
So I don't know. That's a tough one. I agree with you. It should, but I don't know how they would get that data though.
On the other hand, 2 engines means.
Yeah.
Yeah. But 2 engines also increases. But if there wasn't an accident, there's no category for safe landing that wasn't reported. I mean, if it doesn't get reported, the incident database does report. I've had single engine landings where the engine was shut down, and I didn't report it to anybody. So, I mean, I think there's been a criticism of like Richard Collins, and he just said an accident is an accident, an incident is an incident, and the numbers for multi-engine twins, I mean, for twin aircraft, they're just not that great. And because on the other hand, you're right, you have redundancy, but on that you also have 2 engines now, which means double the chance of failure. And so if you look at it, you're not. Sure, yeah, but there are people with single engine that have the same thing. Yeah. Yeah, I know what you're saying, but that's not
Yeah. Is there any way to sort that though?
Okay, it's only there if it happens in an airport where, okay, you got an old ground equipment or something like that, and then the airport will be an incident report. But it can happen out here, I bet, if there wouldn't be any incident. And, you know, yours was an airport, mine was an airport, nobody even came out, you know, I've got an emergency coming in pattern, and nobody even, you know, there's some guys standing talking, that's in the room. And that, you know, I mean, nothing happens.
Yeah. Yeah, right, right. Yeah, that's you know, that's I'm curious because I will ask him that. I don't know the answer to that right now, but yeah, next time I talk to him, I'll you know dig into that a little bit, see what they say.
Last 10 years, there's some of us won't be flying. All these airplanes, hopefully all these airplanes still will be. And I'm not just talking about Aerostar, I'm talking about AG aircraft in general. What carriers going to do? I mean, you know, there's going to be a pretty good size number of AG aircraft, not just wins. Does the carriers have any kind of plan for how they're planning on covering these airplanes? And is there anything associations like this Beach, Cessna, and others can do to help the carriers position themselves so they can cover these airplanes?
Yeah, that's another tough one because I mean I've had the conversations with the carriers and it always drives me crazy because you know aircraft are maintained to such a higher level maintenance-wise than you know cars are. But still, for some reason, you know they still just say, well, nope, you hit 35 years old, we're not going to insure those anymore. You know, 10,000 airplane hours is another number I've heard from them. Once you hit 10,000 airplane hours, they don't want it anymore. So. Yeah, yeah. I guess they, you know, I don't know what the deal is. I mean, again, they must have some data that shows that after that age or after that number of hours that they've had some claims due to that. But you know, so it's already happening. So I don't know if they really intend to continue to insure them that long or not. You know, I'm not sure about that. You know, there's certainly still. I think it goes back to the carriers' appetites. I would still imagine that the same carriers, all of the same carriers right now who are insuring Aerostars are going to continue to insure them for the next 10 years and longer. You know, there's still a lot of carriers out there that write 1930s and 40s airplanes. You know, so I don't really think it's anything we need to hit the panic button on. The carriers who aren't insuring the older aircraft are carriers who are already not insuring Aerostars.
But Lance, if we go back to statistics of 2001, for example, we had 11 fatal accidents in 2001.
Mm-hmm.
We've been cleaning up our accidents since.
Mm-hmm.
We got to continue doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
If we go back to 2001, we're done.
Yeah. And Ken said back in 2001 there were 11 fatal Aerostar accidents. So the point is that to maintain the longevity of Aerostar insurability, we've got to continue to clean up those accidents and claims. Yeah.
He's kind of similar.
Yep. Right. When the SFAR was adapted, it got a lot better. And
We were on the same forces in 2010 and 2001.
yep. Yeah, and unfortunately too, there are still pretty, you know, high-profile U2 losses as well. We had one just here recently. The one I don't know, maybe you know, with COVID, my timeline is completely you know,
I don't know when it was, if it was last year or 5 years ago, but.
I think it was last year, that MU2 in Mississippi went down and killed 5 people. That was one of ours. We had that MU2, and we had it with W. Brown, and you know, our agency is one of W. Brown's top writing agencies on their book, and we've got, you know, at least $5-6 million worth of premium with them. That one accident was $6 million. So that one claim wiped out all the premium they had brought in on all the other aircraft. Well, yeah, but that was only one loss. That there was several other losses that they had paid throughout the years. Well, I just meant with us in general, not all of their premium. I meant just with our agency's premium. That was a wash right there, you know. So. Yeah, right. Well, regardless, the point is, after that, that carrier is no longer writing MU2s. So all it takes is one sometimes. And now there are still some that they're trying to maintain and write, but the large majority of them, they're trying to push them away and non-renew those accounts now, and we're having to move a lot of MU2s over to other carriers who will still write them. So regardless of the increased safety record of those, that's another airplane that still is under a microscope quite a bit. Oh yeah, quite a bit. I mean, you guys are a lot better off than the Saberliner. You know, I mean, yeah. I didn't mean it like that, but I'm saying that absolutely goes a long way, because there are aircraft out there that have no parts support, and there are very, very little carriers who will still insure those airplanes. So they look at that too. Anybody else? All set. Ken, who we got next?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all.